Nobody notices the moment it starts. The moment someone begins paying attention to you. Not casually. Not politely. But psychologically. You won't hear an announcement. You won't get a warning. In fact, most people who become interested in someone don't even realize it's happening themselves. All they know is that something about that person stays in their mind longer than it should. A comment they made. A reaction they didn't have. A silence that felt heavier than expected. And before long, attention turns into observation. Observation turns into curiosity. And curiosity turns into focus. Here's the strange part. The people paying the closest attention to you rarely admit it. Because attention creates tension. The more attention someone pays to another person, the harder it becomes to pretend that person doesn't matter. That's why some people watch quietly. That's why some people test. That's why some people compare. And that's why the strongest signs of attention are often invisible to the person receiving it. What you're about to hear isn't motivation. It's a collection of patterns. 7 signs that people may be paying far more attention to you than they're willing to admit. The hidden truth. Most people think attention looks obvious. They imagine compliments, recognition, people openly expressing interest. But human beings rarely work that way. The strongest forms of attention are often silent. People pay attention to what interests them. They pay attention to what confuses them. And most importantly, they pay attention to what they haven't fully figured out. That's why the loudest person in the room isn't always the most influential. Predictable people are easy to understand. And once people understand you completely, they stop paying close attention. The people who attract the most observation are often the ones who leave questions unanswered. Not intentionally, but naturally. Let's look at the signs. Sign 1. They remember details you forgot. You make a passing comment. You move on. Weeks later, someone brings it up. Maybe it was an opinion. Maybe it was a story. Maybe it was a small detail from a conversation you barely remember having. Yet somehow they do. That usually means your words carried more weight than you realized. People remember what captures their attention. And attention is rarely random. When someone stores details that most people would forget, they're telling you something without saying a word. You stayed on their mind longer than expected. Sign 2. They pay unusual attention before you respond. Watch carefully. Before you answer a question, some people subtly shift their focus toward you. A pause. A held expression. A slight lean forward. They're not necessarily nervous. They're attentive. Because they've learned something important. Your responses aren't always predictable. Most conversations follow familiar patterns. People can usually guess what's coming next. But when someone thinks independently, pauses before speaking, or sees situations differently, others start paying closer attention. Because uncertainty naturally attracts curiosity. And curiosity creates observation. Sign 3. They compare themselves to you. Most comparisons happen in silence. Nobody announces them. Nobody admits them. But they're happening all the time. When people repeatedly pay attention to your habits, your discipline, your decisions, or the way you carry yourself, they naturally begin measuring themselves against you. Not because they dislike you. Not because they admire you. Because comparison is one of the brain's oldest social instincts. Human beings constantly evaluate where they stand in relation to others. And the people who attract the most comparison are often the people who seem comfortable without approval. When someone keeps bringing up your choices, questioning your habits, or showing unusual interest in how you approach life, they're often trying to answer a question for themselves. What makes this person different? And that question is the beginning of attention. Sign 4. They become defensive around you. This one surprises people. You can be completely polite, completely calm, completely respectful, and yet someone becomes strangely defensive in your presence. They justify decisions, defend choices, explain actions that were never questioned. Why? Because attention creates self-awareness, and self-awareness can create discomfort, especially when someone encounters a person who appears secure, disciplined, or difficult to influence. Your presence becomes a mirror. Not because you're judging them, because they start judging themselves. And when that happens, defensiveness often appears before understanding does. Sign 5. They mirror your behavior. Human beings naturally imitate what captures their attention. The way someone sits, the way they speak, the pace they move at, the energy they bring into a room. Most people don't even realize they're doing it. The brain quietly adopts behaviors it finds effective, interesting, or worth understanding. That's why mirroring is such a powerful signal. It's not always admiration. It's attention. The mind is saying, there's something about this person I want to understand. And understanding often begins with imitation. Sign 6. They test you. Not aggressively. Not dramatically. Subtly. A difficult question. A slight challenge. A provocatif comment. Most people assume these moments are attacks. They're often something else. Information gathering. People want to know how stable someone is under pressure. How quickly they become emotional. How easily they can be influenced. How they react when things don't go their way. The test itself isn't important. The reaction is, and that's exactly what they're watching. Sign 7. They explain themselves without being asked. This is one of the strongest signs of all. Someone starts justifying a decision, defending a choice, explaining why they did something. Yet you never questioned them. You never demanded an explanation. You never judged them. And still, they feel compelled to clarify themselves. Why? Because your presence activated self-awareness. People don't explain themselves when they feel completely indifferent. They explain themselves when they feel observed, when they feel evaluated, even if that evaluation exists only in their own mind. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. The people paying the closest attention to you aren't always your biggest supporters. Sometimes they're simply the people who haven't figured you out yet. Human beings are fascinated by unresolved questions. We replay unusual conversations. We revisit unexpected behavior. We think about people who challenge our assumptions. Not because we're obsessed with them. Because uncertainty demands attention. Think about the people you've studied in your own life. It probably wasn't the loudest person. It probably wasn't the most predictable person. It was the person who made you think. The person whose behavior didn't fit the pattern. The person who seemed comfortable in ways you didn't fully understand. That's who the mind returns to. Again and again. People rarely pay close attention to what they completely understand. They pay attention to what remains unresolved. And that's why some individuals attract attention without ever asking for it. And this is where most people make a mistake. The moment they realize attention is on them, they start performing. They explain more. Talk more. Reveal more. They rush to remove the mystery. don't. The people who reveal everything leave little to remember. The people who reveal selectively stay on people's minds. You don't need to become distant. You don't need to become cold. You don't need to play games. Simply become comfortable with not explaining every thought, every decision, and every silence. Because attention grows where certainty ends. The truth is, most people spend their lives trying to get attention, trying to be noticed, trying to be remembered. But attention doesn't always move toward noise. Sometimes it moves toward consistency, toward restraint, toward people who don't feel the need to explain everything they do, the details they remember, the comparisons they make, the defensiveness, the mirroring, the tests, the explanations no one asked for. These are all clues. Small signals that reveal where attention is really flowing. Because the most influential people are rarely the ones demanding attention. They're the ones people keep thinking about after they've left the room. Long after the conversation ends. Long after the noise disappears. Attention can be requested. But significance has to be earned. And the people who are quietly paying attention already know the difference.